Well, hello, hello, regular Drews.
Hello, everyone.
Oh my goodness, welcome to episode 102, Kori. Today we are going to be discussing another Nancy Drew digest, The Haunted Carousel.
Well, aren't you a regular Nancy Drew?
I learned that from the Nancy Drew detective.
Okay, go.
You think you can follow the clues and solve the case of the missing condiment, Nancy Drew?
Because I've read every Nancy Drew mystery ever written.
Nancy, please tell me you're joking.
Wow, you suck at this Nancy Drew stuff. You should get a new hobby.
My name is Carson Drew, and this is my assistant, Nancy.
Nancy Drew.
It's curtains for you, Miss Drew.
Nancy Drew strikes again.
A regular Nancy Drew.
Okay, so this one is number 72, which
Mhm.
honestly is really close to the original 56. It was published in 1988, which I don't know, just feels so crazy to me. And I don't know if you felt this way when you were reading it or not, Corey, but like when I was reading it, it was like it didn't feel like I was reading a book from the 1980s. It felt like I was reading a book from the 1960s.
You think so? Yeah.
Yes. And I don't know if that's just because like I'm used to the Nancy Drew files or like that version of the 80s, which is
Right,
just
yeah.
obviously a different series and supposed to be so much more intense and suspenseful. But this one felt very traditional to me. Like,
Yes.
yeah, Nancy asking Carson's permission to do things, even though she's an adult. And I mean, she is still his child and living at home. So, to a certain extent, I understand that. But like, there was a lot of that, but then also a lot of traditional gender role-y things
Big
with,
time.
Nancy, Bess, and George looking after the children and making dinner for people and for the children and all of that. So there was that. But honestly, I didn't hate it. I didn't feel like it was super, even though it was super traditional. And I
Yeah.
know we've talked about that in the past. I didn't feel like it was necessarily negative in this book overall. And
Mhm.
it felt more nostalgic to me than it felt gross.
Okay,
And
yeah.
I don't know necessarily why. That's just the impression that I got.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. What did you think?
I felt like it was pretty middle of the road for me, honestly.
Yeah.
It was I mean, nothing bad about it. I don't have much, like, negative things to say about it, but it also
Mhm.
it didn't leave, like, a super big impression on me where it was like, "Oh, that was
Mm.
so good and so,
Mhm.
compelling of a story." Same way I feel about the game, honestly, so I wasn't surprised that the book is
Sure.
pretty much the same way,
Yeah.
even though there's quite a few differences between the game and the book, but we'll get there.
I think I realize why I feel the way that I feel about the book, and I feel like seems campy.
Yeah.
Like, it feels very camp, like, a little bit ridiculous, and a little bit over the top, but in, like, a
Mhm.
really warm, nostalgic kind of way.
It almost has to be for an amusement park setting, you know?
Yes. And I think it really reminded me of the 1970s show.
Okay, yeah.
Especially with the amusement park setting.
Mhm.
It felt like a scene like the haunted house scene in the Hollywood Phantom
Mhm.
episodes that we watched of the '70s show. It felt almost exactly like that,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
with just, like, the running around, and there is a haunted house scene in this book where they go into a haunted house. I was
Mhm.
like, "This is straight out of that '70s show." And obviously, this was written in 1988.
Yeah.
It could have been based off of that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So maybe maybe yeah, and also in the way that it felt, like, older than when it was published. Like, it didn't feel like
Mhm.
the '80s, it felt like earlier. So I think that is part of the reason why I feel like it's campy. It feels like
Mhm.
they're setting it in a different time and
Yeah.
place than present day when the book was written, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
But I didn't mind it. It didn't the mystery itself didn't super stand out to me, wasn't really memorable or interesting. And I do feel like the ending is a little bit convoluted and just the way that it happens because it happens so quickly.
Right.
And I didn't dislike it necessarily, but I felt like it felt like a very Scooby-Doo villain reveal kind of an ending where we get all of this mystery and then right at the end Nancy's figured it out, but she doesn't explain it to us. We don't solve the mystery alongside Nancy. Nancy solves the mystery and then explains it to us as the reader at the end along with everybody else, that she's solving the mystery for.
It did get a little confusing.
Which was a little confusing. Yeah, because we weren't, they gave us some hints, obviously, so you could solve it, but it was definitely a reveal kind of a thing. It wasn't we solve it and then we confront the bad guy.
Right.
It was we confront the bad guy, it's solved, but we still don't know why until
Right.
Nancy explains
Yeah.
it. So
It's like, why are we doing this? And just tell us why we're going here.
Right,
Yeah, no,
right. Which it doesn't feel like a lot of Nancy Drew books are not like that. So it felt a little bit different than other Nancy Drew books, but I enjoyed it. I think.
Yeah.
I think it was interesting, and I loved that. But I also love the Scooby Doo formula, so that's probably why.
of course.
But yeah, it was definitely a little different, a little interesting, not super memorable, but also not bad. I feel like. Yeah.
I did like the setting a lot.
Mhm.
I don't know. It's just a fun setting. In the game, if you haven't played it, we really only get to see the carousel.
Yeah.
And then we can kind of go behind the scenes, like into, I guess, maintenance area of one of is it the haunted house or the roller coaster?
Roller coaster.
Yeah.
Well, kind of both.
Haunted house roller coaster?
Well, in the roller coaster, you see more of it, but in the haunted house, you enter it. You don't enter it through the main entrance. Neither of them. You enter it through the main entrance. You go into like this side hallway. So
where the staff only goes.
Right. That's how you enter each one. So
we'll ride the carousel, but we can't ride anything else. And then we
Right.
really can only go look at the other things for 2 of them.
Mhm.
But this in the book, we actually did get to go see the fleshed out amusement park, and we actually Nancy gets to go ride some rides, and so that was nice to kind of get a little bit more detail on what is actually happening at the park, because we didn't get that in the game. So it was like,
Yeah. I did replay the game in preparation for this because I don't know if I mentioned this on the episode last time when we were talking about preparing for this, but I don't remember. I didn't remember Haunted Carousel, the game, at all. It's just as disappointing as it was the first time around.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I didn't love it. It was just so short, so fast. I literally finished it in 2 hours, if that.
Yeah, it is really quick.
And so, yeah. And I wasn't super surprised by anything. Turns out I did remember more than I thought, which is not surprising, but yeah.
I think it's one of the easier games as well. So that's probably why it goes so quickly.
Yeah.
The game itself is honestly a little bit campy as well.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
Which is fun.
Obviously Miles the Magnificent Memory Machine is just a huge comedy bit of that game. But there are no puzzles in the game, and the hardest puzzle is typing in a word to the back of the arcade machine.
Right.
That's really it. Or maybe the lathe. Maybe
Barnacle Blast, honestly, is probably the most challenging part of the game.
Part of it. I'm like, God, but yeah, no, it wasn't super engaging as far as all the other games go. And obviously we can talk about the differences between that and the book after we talk about the book a little bit. But spoiler alert, they're almost completely different.
Yes. No Miles appearance in the book,
No Miles.
Unfortunately. I do think he was a great addition to the game.
Oh,
honestly,
absolutely.
Because we do have in the book, there's a few puzzles that we get about Joy Trent and everything, where it's just in the game, it's just Miles that gives us those puzzles and those hints. So
yeah, definitely. I think the game did a good, I don't want to say a good job adapting it because it doesn't necessarily feel like an adaptation of the book.
An improvement upon maybe a little bit.
I feel like it's more that they just took the setting and a couple of the characters and was like, what kind of mystery can we make out of this? What kind of independent mystery can we make out of this?
Right.
which I don't hate. I mean, I think that's fine. Like if you
Oh
want to
yeah.
do your own thing, and of course they do that tons later with all their later games. And obviously those are excellent. So
Yes.
I don't hate that they did that. I just think neither one is particularly good.
That's okay. You can
Yeah,
only
it's
go
okay.
so far with what you've got in the first place.
And
So
there's always got to be, you always have to have, you know, better ones and worse ones. Like
yes.
that's just how creation works. So
Yes. That is a-okay.
yeah. But okay. We ready? Do you want to talk about the cover?
Yes, absolutely. This is, of course, a Ruth Sanderson, or at least the
Oh,
version
I
that
don't
I
have
have
that one.
is. Oh, you don't? Okay.
Mm-mm. I have this one. I don't actually know who did this. Oh, never mind. Alita Jenks.
Okay,
Oh
very
yeah.
nice. I feel
She
like
did
she did one of
the
the ones we did recently, right?
I think
Was it Royal
so.
Tower?
Yes, I think so. Okay, so we should talk about the differences here between
Yes,
yours and mine. So
definitely.
talk about yours first.
So mine, of course, is the Wanderer cover version of this, and it's just Nancy. We think probably in the haunted house where she is in a red sweater and jeans, and she's actually it's like a almost dungeon looking room, like of stone walls and everything, and she's kind of facing backward, looking over her shoulder at this like shadow. You can't see the actual
Yeah.
person, but you can see the shadow of the person on the wall, and then there's just some kind of like amusement park junk around her. And actually, we learned a fun story about this cover at the convention, not this most recent one, but the one 2 years ago that we went to. Ruth Sanderson, the artist for this one, loves doing horses and, in
Mhm.
fact, is probably one of the most talented horse illustrators
Yes.
that there is,
It's like her
period.
thing.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, Haunted Carousel, she was so determined to put the carousel horse on the cover of the book because it's so iconic, obviously so important to the mystery. But the carousel horse was not in this scene.
Mhm.
So she just added it in anyway and just made it look like it was part of the junk in the background. She actually even showed us at the convention like a sample drawing that she sent to Simon and Schuster, and they were like, "Absolutely not! Take out the horse." And so she was like, "Oh, well, what if I just like make it a little bit smaller and less obvious?" And she sent them another version, and they noticed right away, and they're like, "Stop it!
Rude.
Take out the horse! It's not in there." And she was like, "Darn it! I really wanted to do the horse." And it's like, you have one of the most famous horse
Mhm.
illustrators ever, and you're telling her not to do the horses. I just thought that, that was a really funny story.
Well, and it's honestly so kind of insulting because in the cover that I have, it does
It's
clearly
there.
feature the carousel horse. This is the minstrel version.
Yes, tell us
Um,
about yours.
so Nancy is on the cover on the carousel,
Mhm.
riding it, and you can see kind of the big dark carousel horse kind of looming behind her. She's wearing like this pink button down tucked into her classic 80s high-waisted jeans, and she's like holding on to the railing on the carousel. It's clearly on, like she's riding it. And the whole thing is kind of set at an angle too, which I love, just to kind of illustrate. I feel like it illustrates the movement, and Nancy's kind of hair is blowing in the wind a little bit. So you can really tell that she's on the carousel, it's
Mhm.
moving. And she's like full face front and center, but she does have some very dramatic lighting on her face. It's like lighting from beneath her. So she
Mhm.
has kind of like these intense shadows kind of around her eyes that makes it seem very dramatic and scary. Okay, so I will say, so yes, it's super insulting that they wouldn't let Ruth draw the carousel horse. And why would you not want the carousel on the cover
Right.
of the book The Haunted Carousel? Makes no
Right.
sense to me. And I do feel like Ruth's cover, though, is more indicative of like the vibe of the book.
Sure, yeah.
And of course, it is an actual scene that occurs in the book. I don't think this is an actual scene from the book because I don't think Nancy actually ever rides the carousel herself.
Maybe
Um,
they do it. Oh, no, they don't. They
the kids
escort the
do.
children
The
to it
kids
at the very
do.
beginning.
And she
Yeah.
sees it, but I don't know that she's
She
ever on
ever.
it while it's on. And that's clearly what it seems to be in this shot.
Right.
So I don't know. It's like, you guys figure out what you want to do. But
Yeah.
I do love the cover, this cover that I have on the minstrel book, because it's, first of all, it's pink.
Yeah.
It's
Very cute.
pink. It's very regular Nancy Drew coded with just like the colors, which I love. And it's also like just really fun and exciting looking. And I, of course, love the framing of it, like I said before. I do have a really small problem with the hoop earrings that Nancy is wearing, because I don't feel like Nancy Drew would ever wear hoop earrings on a mystery. That seems like you're just asking for trouble.
Not very practical. Yeah,
Not
she doesn't have them
practical.
in my version.
But it is the 80s, so and they're smaller hoops. So what are you gonna do, right? What are
Yeah,
you,
fair.
gonna do? But yeah. Also, Kori, I noticed that the illustrator signed the cover there. I don't.
Oh,
It's really
nice.
hard to show you on the camera, but just Alita, I see her signature there on the cover, and I thought
Cool.
that that was verboten. I thought that illustrators couldn't do that because I remember we talked to Trish at the convention,
Mhm.
and she was telling us that she wasn't allowed to sign them, but she did sign them anyway.
Maybe well, that was the files. Maybe they
Maybe it was
just had
different
different
rules.
rules by
Yeah.
then. Obviously, this would have been at the same time files were being published. I know Tandy signed all of his original
Mm,
works.
yeah.
Nappy, I believe let me just yeah, I see Nappy's signature on this copy, so
Hmm.
maybe for the mystery stories,
Maybe
they
it
were
was different.
allowing that. I don't see Ruth's signature on this, but obviously this isn't the full picture because they had to crop it for how the image is, but
Yeah. And
hmm,
just to be clear, I
interesting.
am a fan of illustrators signing their work. I think that's
Yes.
very important to do. And I am very glad for those who stood up and did it, even if they were told not to.
Yes.
But yeah, I just thought that was interesting.
I
So
don't see why they'd not want them to sign their work. It's not like it's Carolyn Keene and they're trying to make it a secret, you know?
no, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's just like a branding thing. Like they don't want like a cover of their book to have someone else's name on it, maybe. Um, I
Eh,
don't know, which seems a little silly, but
do better, Simon and Schuster. Let your artists have
they
credit.
probably do at this point. I'm sure the
Yeah.
diaries have them. Actually, let me pull one out to see. It doesn't say on the cover. I'm not seeing a signature just on the one that I'm looking at, but on the
Mm.
back it does say cover designed by and the name. But
Okay, well that's good.
also the cover illustration has a separate copyright than the
Hmm.
book, which is interesting. So the book is copyright Simon and Schuster 2015, cover illustration copyright 2015 by Aaron McGuire, which is interesting.
Maybe copyright laws changed around artwork
Maybe.
between at some point in this. That would have been interesting information to include in our History of
I
Illustrators
know,
episode,
I
but
know.
who knows? We're just
We'll
guessing
have
at
to
this
do
point.
some more research, figure that out.
Yes.
Yeah, so just interesting.
Mhm.
Interesting. But overall, I love both covers. I think both covers are great.
Oh, absolutely.
I think I do prefer the pink one, but just because it's pink and I love pink,
Sure.
obviously. But I do think Ruth's cover is a little bit more, feels more like the Haunted Carousel, the book,
Mhm.
than the cover on the Minstrel book. But
It almost feels a little bit more like the game to me as well. Maybe it's just
mm,
because of the red theme, which the game
yeah,
also has kind of a red theme in its package art and everything. So,
totally. I can see that.
anyway,
Okay, 3
3
words.
words. Yes. Amusement park or carousel, I feel like has to be one of them, or
Right.
carousel horse, one of those.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Carousel. Weirdly like news
Okay, yeah.
or even like small town news, like
Okay.
small town gossipy kind of vibes.
Yes.
Like I feel like so much of it surrounds the news, and obviously we'll talk about that when we get into it. But it's like, yeah, a newspaper guy approaches Nancy, and that's the whole reason why she's solving the case is because she's placed a
Mhm.
bet on whether or not she can solve it. And then in the end, there's also lots to do with the news. Like she uses the news to kind of catch out the bad guys.
Mhm.
And I just feel like the whole reason why this mystery exists is kind of because of gossip and like just, yeah, I don't know, small town vibes. Everyone is like so freaked out about this haunted carousel like turning on in the middle of the night or whatever. And it's like, well, clearly that's because your small town has no crime. Like, this is what's dramatic and scary to you guys. And I agree, it's a good story. But, like, you're not telling me that in, like, Dallas, Texas, anybody is reporting on a carousel that's just turning on randomly. They're like, faulty wiring at the amusement park. Like, no one cares. Someone was just murdered down the street. Oh, yeah. So Carousel, small town gossip, and then Baldy. Fingers.
Baldy, fingers and Baldy. Oh my
Fingers and
gosh.
Baldy. Baldy fingers.
Baldy fingers. Perfect.
Oh my god. Oh my god, I laughed so hard when we figured that out. We'll get there, regular Drews, because it's so funny. You will not believe.
Oh my
But yeah,
gosh.
okay, so Carousel, small town gossip, and Baldy fingers.
Who wrote this one?
I
Like,
know,
who
I don't
came up
know.
with that?
I don't know.
Let me see if I have it listed here. It was James Duncan Lawrence. Of course it
Okay.
was.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you so much for that, James.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay.
Okay. So we start off, and Nancy, Bess, and George are visiting the Riverside Amusement Park with the quote unquote Custer children. They like group them together. I don't even think we learn their individual names. Maybe we do. I don't
No.
remember. But it's not important because literally this is the only time they show up in like the whole book. It's just at the beginning here. And they're just like young relatives of Bess and George who are just visiting town. And so Bess and George are kind of responsible for taking care of them, entertaining them, while their parents visit with their parents. So
This was so unnecessary
I
to
know.
me. I don't know why we had to insert all of this just for them to go away after chapter 1 and then never like
It makes
who
no
cares?
sense. It makes no sense because it's like they don't help with the mystery. They are not impactful to the plot. It's literally seems like just an opportunity to showcase Nancy's and Bess and George's, I guess, like caregiving
Mhm.
abilities.
Absolutely.
Which is weird. It's like, I'm sorry, why do we care about that? Again, this is 1988. It's
Yeah.
not like this is 1954. You know what I mean? 88. And we still need to somehow like put these girls on a pedestal for being like, I don't know, just amazed. They're so amazing at taking care of children. Don't you want to marry them? Like, what is this?
Uh,
It's gross.
is it just an excuse for them to get to the amusement park? Is it, oh, we're
Yeah,
babysitting these children. We have to entertain them. Can Bess and
right.
George and Nancy not just go as
Exactly.
just as a group themselves?
I don't understand. I don't
You're allowed
understand.
to just be 18-year-olds going to an amusement park for a day. You
Right.
don't have to have an excuse of children.
Right.
Okay, anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so they're at this amusement park and they are headed to this haunted carousel ride in the park, which apparently has been the subject of much local gossip because recently it has begun to start up randomly in the middle of the night with no one nearby. And when anyone gets close to investigate it, it just stops. So very mysterious. And they're kind of talking about this, thing that's been happening. When a reporter that Nancy knows overhears them talking about this, recognizes Nancy and dares her to solve the mystery of this haunted carousel. And they even arrange a bet that if Nancy can solve the mystery, River Heights News will arrange for every child in River Heights to attend the amusement park for a day for free.
So thoughtful and generous of
I know.
Nancy. Well, it's her idea for that as
Yeah.
well. It's not like, we'll do this. It's like, what do you want? And she says, I want all the children to come.
Yeah, it's really quite sweet of her because she's talking about like how much she loves the amusement park and how much she wishes that every kid would get to experience it. And so of course, she's not solving the mystery for herself and for her own reputation. She's doing it for the good of the children.
Also, not to interrupt every 4 seconds here,
Please
but
do.
and I know that she is technically a Files character, but I wish that they'd made this reporter just
Deirdre!
Brenda Carlton.
Oh, sorry, Brenda.
Yes.
Sorry. I confused the two a lot. Yes, Brenda. Oh my God, yes.
It would have been so good because then it could have been like a little bit of a competitive thing for Nancy as well. Like,
Right.
I'm going to solve this just to prove Brenda wrong. Like,
Yeah.
It's so funny.
No, totally. And of course, Brenda Carlton does not exist in this universe, although she
No.
has the file started before this. So she
Right.
definitely existed by this point. It would have been an easy addition.
Yeah, she's in the very first file. So yeah, she was
Yes.
definitely around already. So
Right.
yeah.
So yeah. But also, too, it makes me think like what a missed opportunity for the game. Like
Right.
the Haunted Carousel game doesn't have like a Brenda character. It doesn't involve the news at all, which is a little bit of a disappointment, I think, because I think this honestly does like this whole like bet and the whole like kind of using or leveraging of the River Heights kind of network, news
Mhm.
network, is very interesting and fun. It's a great part
Absolutely.
of the book, and it's a great plot point, and I love that. So even if it was just like a news character, like a news character, a phone character,
Right.
like in the game, I feel like that would have added a lot to a
Mhm.
game that honestly needed a lot more content.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot that's in the book that did not make it into the game, unfortunately, that probably could have. And the game is, of course, not even set in River Heights, so they
right.
didn't even have it to where like, oh, Nancy does know this person that she can just
Yeah.
call up at the news station
Yeah.
or whatever.
And we'll have to talk about that because I find that very interesting, the way that the PC games tend to lean away from setting things in River Heights. Obviously, the first and only game that we get set in River Heights is Alibi and Ashes,
Mhm.
and I even feel like they only did that because it was kind of like a special occasion. It was for some anniversary. But like in all the other games, they always choose to set it in some foreign location or
Mhm.
some other state or whatever. Nancy's always traveling. And I do wonder why that is.
I think honestly it was just because they weren't ready to do River Heights yet, that they didn't want to have to build Bess and George yet, especially this early
Right.
in the series. We had not even seen Bess or George as an in-game character yet. And I think if you put it in River Heights, you have to be able to explain
No,
why Bess and George
absolutely.
and Carson aren't around, you know?
Absolutely. But I just don't understand why. Like, it seems to me that not that I'm saying that I don't think it was a bad choice necessarily. Obviously, I think all of the games are great. I just am really curious as to why because like when I think about the Nancy Drew PC games, I'm sorry, obviously this is way off topic. But when I think about the Nancy Drew books and the Nancy Drew PC game or just the books. When I think about the books, the mystery stories, I think River Heights, settings in River Heights, small town mysteries,
Mhm.
small town vibes. And yes, there are ones where she travels, but overall, what I'm reading about is I'm reading about Nancy solving mysteries in and around River Heights. And so, like, to think about that as like, well, we're basing a series of games off of Nancy Drew and to decide to totally diverge from that is interesting. Like it's an
Yes, it
interesting
is.
choice. And I hear what you're saying about them not being ready to do that and like I understand
Mm.
that I guess, but I'm also like, well, why didn't you start with that? You know?
Good question. Yeah. Well, because Secrets Can Kill was also set really close to River Heights. And then they were
Yeah.
like, what if we put it in Florida?
Mhm.
Where did that come from? You know, how did they
Right.
end up picking Florida, you know?
Yeah. I guess
Interesting.
they are the games technically are based off the Nancy Drew files. They're not based off the Nancy Drew mystery stories exactly, but we diverge from that pretty
Yeah,
quickly.
it's the idea was to start out that way, and then it
Right.
expanded quickly from that, but yeah.
Right. So, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's interesting.
yeah.
Anyway,
Hmm.
what was he talking about?
Hmm.
What were we talking about? Okay. So, yeah, so they make this bet about Nancy being able to solve the mystery or not. And so obviously Nancy is really kind of concerned about this because she knows that this is going to be big news. Like she's in River Heights. The carousel itself is already big news, and Nancy knows that just like herself offering to solve it in the news and making this bet is going to be all over the papers. And she's worried that that's going to get in the way of her mystery solving ability. Um, but she's still game to do it. She's still going to try. But then, like, right after this interaction, she is immediately distracted by the sight of a couple in distress. And these are the Tromples, and Nancy actually met them earlier the day in the day at the amusement park in line to get cotton candy or something. And they're this couple from Switzerland. They're here in the States on their honeymoon. And it turns out Mr. Tromple's wallet, which contained all of their money for this honeymoon trip, was pickpocketed here at the amusement park. And Nancy is really upset about this. And she's like, oh, I really hate that their first experience of River Heights is they've been pickpocketed and she
Mhm.
will not stand for it. So she immediately jumps in to help. And she, with her extensive knowledge of crime, explains to them how likely their money was pickpocketed by a 3-person team, Which I just find hilarious that, like, Nancy approaches this, like, clearly upset couple in distress. I think Mrs. Tromble is, like, crying or something, and she's like, "So let me explain to you how pickpocketing works. So there's this one guy, he's gonna kinda distract you while the other guy comes up, picks your pocket, and then hands it off to this other guy." It's like, "Oh my god, Nancy, read the room.
Yeah.
Read the room."
Seriously.
But anyway, they end up, investigating, searching for the pickpockets, and finding them still in the park with, I guess, the help of the Custer children somehow and some witnesses nearby. And then while the Tromples go get the police, Nancy tries to confront one of these pickpockets by herself and ask for the stolen money back. Fortunately, the other two pickpockets come up and they start to kind of surround Nancy. It's a little bit of a scary moment, but the cops soon show up and they get spooked by the police and they run. And the thief that Nancy confronted ends up throwing the money that he stole up into the air to, I guess, distract them as he runs away. And so they are able to gather up all of the money and return it to the Tromples. And the police chase the criminals while they do that. And anyway, then after that little exchange, they finally make it to the carousel. It's called the Wonderland Gallop, which I thought was really an interesting name for it. It's apparently very beautiful, very ornate. They talk about how the horses are so beautiful and the colors and the decorations are very like exquisite. And Nancy, already starting her mystery solving business, goes and introduces herself to the carousel operator when he goes on a break. We learn that his name is Leo Novak, and he has worked on the carousel for a really long time. Apparently, the carousel was previously owned by someone named Mr. Ogden, and then about 8 years ago, Ogden actually moved the carousel from River Heights to another park out in the Midwest. And then he died recently, and so Leo Novak bought it and moved it back to River Heights. So
Awesome.
yes. So a little bit complicated, but the carousel was in River Heights previously, left River Heights 8 years ago, was purchased by someone else, and then brought back to River Heights. Anyway, Novak says that, after this haunting business, he looked everything over on the carousel and, couldn't find anything wrong with it. So he doesn't know what has been going on, but he can't find anything wrong. So it must be ghosts. And so he just wishes Nancy well in her ghost hunt. After some more amusement park fun with the children, the gang decides to call it a day and they head back to the riverboat where the Custers are staying.
Why not?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it sounds like a really nice vacation. Apparently, I get these relatives of Bess and George have rented this riverboat. They live further north, and so they have like this month off or something from work, and they rent this riverboat and drive it down, sail it down, I guess, to River Heights, and are just living on it while they visit with their relatives. Cool,
Great,
fun.
yeah.
Just yeah, interesting. I guess we just really have to solidify the fact that River Heights is on a river for some reason.
I think it's the Muskoka River.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. No.
which I would be disappointed if it wasn't actually on a river.
Right. But yeah, so they head back to this riverboats to, of course, cook dinner for the kids because the kids need their dinner. And then when they get there, they notice a shadowy figure on the houseboat. And Bess goes for help while Nancy and George go aboard, armed with a rock and a stick to confront whoever is lurking on the boat.
I'm sure that'll do the job.
It sure does, because it turns out it's just Ned being a jerk. He's just like sneaked onto this boat to try to scare them.
Oh my gosh.
Which he even like laughs at them when he sees that they are quote unquote armed with like makeshift weapons. Like this
Oh my gosh.
pisses me off big time.
He's lucky they didn't call the police on him. Like,
seriously, I'm so mad. Yeah, no, Bess turns around, so we don't even get the satisfaction of the police hassling Ned for scaring girls.
Oh my gosh.
With your presence. Like, but I just need to put a PSA out there for any guy who thinks it's funny to sneak up on women. Don't do that.
Don't do it.
Don't do that. It's not, listen, you might get a good chuckle out of it, but you know what you're doing is you're making women be scared for their life.
Yeah.
You may not understand it as a man, okay? Because you don't have to live in fear of, bigger and stronger people murdering you at just any opportunity, but it's like real and it's very scary, okay? It's not fun, not funny, and
No.
women may laugh afterwards, but they're laughing out of the relief that they weren't just actually murdered, okay? So it's not a fun time. It's not a fun time for the women. Okay? So just next time you want to do something funny, you want to play a little prank, let's not do that prank, okay? Let's not jump out and scare women. Let's I don't know. What's another good prank? One of those water squirting flowers or something like
Sure.
do that. Okay?
Yeah, there's a difference between showing up from out of town to surprise your girlfriend with
Right.
your arrival and doing this. He was intentionally trying to scare them.
Yeah, it's messed up.
Yeah, it's
Anyway,
not like a sweet, "Oh, I'm here now, Nancy,
no, it's I'm
surprise."
gonna
No.
hide on this boat to jump out to make them think that someone is here to attack them.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna laugh at them when I realize at the futile attempts that they made to try to protect themselves, as if they could have protected themselves from someone my size.
Yeah. Fun.
That's trash.
Themselves and the children that they're there
Yes,
babysitting.
by the way, the reason why
Uh-huh.
they do this, Nancy is like, Bess, you go get the cops, cuss your children, you stay on this dock, you do not move from this dock. George and I are going to go on this boat to beat the crap out of whatever person is standing there because we're responsible for you right now. Oh! No, so mad. So mad.
Ned, you're lucky you don't get shot doing stuff
Oh
like
my
that. Come on
gosh.
now.
No, seriously, Nancy needs to be strapped. Nancy needs to carry a gun. I don't even believe in that, and I think Nancy needs to be strapped.
Yeah.
You know?
With all the stuff that she gets into, honestly.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Carry a taser at least. A la Veronica Mars.
Yes. I was like, doesn't she do that in one mystery? No, I'm thinking
it's
of Mystery of
Veronica
the Seven
Mars?
Keys
Oh.
with the taser ring.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Anyway. But yes, Veronica Mars does have
Mhm.
the iconic taser, and that's what Nancy needs.
Although
at the very
season
least.
4, she upgrades to a gun. I'm just
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah.
Anyway. So yeah, he's come here to surprise Nancy because he wants to take her out tonight instead of tomorrow because tomorrow he has to go back to Emerson or something.
Bye.
I know, seriously, just cancel. Jeez. But so Nancy agrees and they go leave together to have this date. They end up going to this Western inn or something. They wear cowboy gear, they make a big deal out of putting on jeans and cowboy boots and cowboy hat and checkered shirts and stuff. It's hilarious. As someone from Texas, it's just I find that kind of thing peak comedy. Anyway, over dinner, Nancy tells him all about the haunted carousel business and how she plans to stake it out tonight, and hopefully that, she's wanting to see this haunting business or whatever. And Ned says that he'll go with her tonight. Who invited you, Ned? But then asks that she promise that she won't go there after dark alone. And to which I love this part. Nancy responds with, perhaps you're right. But then she thinks to herself how she didn't actually promise him anything. And how she is not going to promise him anything because, of course, she's going to go to the carousel alone at night if she wants to.
Love it.
Anyway, so they go to the carousel. They go to the park, making sure, by the way, to get Carson's permission first to stay out late. And also to pick up Ned's special night vision binoculars. Which is hilarious. Because I don't know why you have those, Ned, but okay.
Why does he have them and Nancy doesn't have something like that?
Right.
With all the snooping she does sitting in bushes all night.
Anyway, they settle into the tree line by the carousel to wait. And Nancy, this part irritated me because Nancy ends up falling asleep. And I'm like, in what universe?
No.
In what universe is it Nancy falling asleep and not Ned here?
Mm-hmm.
But Nancy falls asleep and Ned has to shake her awake at some point because he notices two figures approaching and climbing aboard the carousel. They seem to be examining the horses, but it's kind of hard to tell what they're doing exactly. And then suddenly the carousel turns on.
So the two figures that we're seeing here aren't anywhere near the like control box for the carousel, and they actually almost like fall over when it starts. So it does seem like they were genuinely surprised by this and
Yeah.
couldn't have been the ones to turn it on. So they take off running, and Ned chases them, and then Nancy kind of follows behind. But she loses sight of him and the two figures when they go into this like maze in the amusement park. And at this point, Nancy runs into Leo Novak, who is scrambling to get out of his nearby trailer and get to the carousel because he's heard it come on as well. She explains what happens and then continues to like try to follow Ned. Eventually, she does find him face down and unconscious on the ground,
Oh gosh.
because someone has just knocked him out here. He comes to a little bit and they realize what's happened here. And obviously, the two bad guys have gotten away at this point. And then Nancy takes Ned home because he needs to recover a little bit. Jeez. The next morning, a newspaper article comes out about the bet that Nancy has with this River Heights news reporter guy, and the Drew's phone is ringing off the hook. People are calling constantly to give her tips and stuff.
Yes.
A lot of it is just bogus and like doesn't actually give any information at all. But Hannah does tell Nancy that she did get a call from someone who actually sounded like they were more credible. Her name is Joy Trent, and she wants Nancy to investigate a different mystery for her. Beth shows up at the house at this point, though. She actually was trying to call Nancy but couldn't get through because of all the other phone calls that were coming in. But she's inviting her to a cookout at her house tonight, and Nancy says that she'll go, but she asked her if you want to go to the amusement park in the meantime to look for more clues. So they go, and when they get there, they run into Officer Doyle, who was one of the officers who helped with the pickpocket situation yesterday. And he tells Nancy that she was really flirting with danger when she confronted the two bad guys. And she's like, "Oh, what does that mean? Are they like bad criminals or something like that?" And apparently, yes, they are. Their names are Fingers Malone and Baldy Krebs, I think. And they are, I guess, like infamous pickpockets in the area. They used to be operating in St. Louis for a while, and they're like super dangerous. And a detective from St. Louis PD like came over here to try to like get them. And he's actually with Officer Doyle right now, so they introduced him to Nancy as Detective Norris. So the two of these officers are pretty sure that Fingers and Baldy might show up again. Oh my gosh, who came up with these names?
It's just as good. Do you remember Boatswain
Oh my God.
Bostwick Bumbleton?
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Gosh, what was that from?
Crumbling Wall.
Yes.
Clue in the
Clue
Crumbling
in the
Wall.
Crumbling
Yeah.
Wall. You remember Salty? Oh my gosh, Salty.
The
Like
best.
the names. Who comes up with this? Like the most stereotypical criminal names I've ever heard in my
know.
life. Fingers Malone.
I wonder what kind of crime he does.
Oh
my
gosh.
gosh. Pickpocketing.
Ugh.
That
I
could be also
hope.
something horrible as well.
I
But
know.
geez. And then Baldy. Is he bald? Like, where did these
Presumably.
nicknames come from?
Presumably. Well, no, I think he is because later he wears a wig, so I think it's
Oh, that's
just
right, yeah.
easy for him because he's not.
Master of disguise. This actually does feel a little bit more back in time to me.
Yeah.
Just the fact that like somebody would get the nickname Fingers from being known for pickpocketing feels like a very 1960s thing to me.
Dude, that
I
feels
don't
like
know.
a 1920s thing to me.
Yeah.
Like, that is so old school. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about camp, though. This is
Mhm.
such camp. Like,
Very camp. Yes.
calling criminals like Fingers Malone and Baldy Krebs. Come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
Seriously. Oh my gosh. This is crazy. Okay, so these two guys, Fingers and Baldy, are these hardened criminals from St. Louis. So they warn Nancy to be careful if she runs into them again. At this point, Bess and Nancy are going to go back to the carousel. They look over it a little bit. They don't really see anything interesting or anything that would really point to these hauntings. But then some just like random passerby walks by and introduces himself as Arno Franz. And he is a self-proclaimed amusement park expert. And he's kind of checking out the carousel as well. And Nancy notices him doing this and asks him if he knows anything about this carousel. And he says, yes, actually. He noticed that the lead horse of the carousel, the one that is obviously the one at the very front, like right behind that little sleigh thing or whatever. And it's the one that's like most ornately decorated on the whole carousel. It's the nicest one. But this particular lead horse isn't really the same quality. Like it just looks like it's a little bit different. Like maybe it was made at a different time than the rest of the carousel. It looks like it's a replacement horse, honestly. So Nancy and Bess go ask Leo Novak about this, and he says, yes, the lead horse was actually damaged a while ago and was replaced several years ago. But this was way before the nighttime hauntings ever even started, so he doesn't see why replacing the carousel horse like 10 years ago or whatever would really matter to this at all. And he does also say that last night he didn't find anything wrong with the carousel after the two guys were there. Like he doesn't think that they mess with it at all. So Nancy asks him if he'll let her get an engineer out to like take a look at the carousel, see if anything is going on, and he agrees. So they leave the park, and Nancy, on her way out, spots Fingers Malone.
Oh no! Fingers!
So maybe this is the scene that's on the cover of my book here, because this is where she chases him into the haunted house. And Bess kind of like waits at the exit in case he tries to sneak back out. And this is very spooky. She ends up getting scared by all the like trickery stuff going on inside the haunted house. But eventually she does spot Fingers and he runs off again. And Nancy gets knocked out from behind. So was Baldy also here as well? But then she wakes up on a couch in the haunted house. Why is there a couch here?
I don't know.
But anyway, the
Break
police
room?
are
I don't know.
yeah, maybe little staff area.
Yeah.
But the police are like hovering around her, and she tells them like, "Ah, I was chasing after Fingers Malone," and they're like, we searched this entire place, and Bess has been watching the exit. We didn't find anyone else here, so maybe you just kind of fell. Or your girl brain forgot, but it definitely wasn't Fingers Malone.
Dude,
But
this pisses me off so much,
yeah.
for real. For real.
Yeah.
Because it's like, not only are they like, oh yeah, well, you must have just made it up. You must have just like been imagining it.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, a sexist. Let's not believe the girl. She must have been hysterical. They even say, oh, you must have gotten so scared by Inside the Haunted House that you hit your own head on something.
Yeah.
And passed out. Like the insult.
Yeah.
That is. But two, also, this is a plot hole.
Yeah.
This is a plot hole because we never.
Where did he go?
Where did he go? We never learn. We never figure out how he gets out of the haunted house. If there's supposed to be some secret tunnel or whatever, that's not in the book.
That's where I thought it was going to go. Because
Yes.
in the game, we do have some secret tunnels under the haunted house. And so I'm just in my mind reading this. I'm like, oh, well, he went down in the tunnels and that's where we're going to end up in a minute. Nope.
So it's really just an opportunity for us to try to make Nancy feel bad. Is really all this is. But anyway, so yeah, they're acting like Nancy just has like this overactive imagination, and Nancy's like, well, did I imagine getting hit in the back of the head? And they're like, yeah, you must have freaked yourself out, blah, blah, blah. Ugh, unbelievable.
You can't be trusted to judge your own reality. You just make stuff up.
Afterwards, they go back to Nancy's house for some lunch, and they meet up with George. And over lunch, George mentions that she happens to know this boy in town this summer who's going to school for engineering. His name is Neil Sawyer, but I never wrote that down ever again later, so I just call him Engineer Guy. And he could probably look at the carousel for Nancy, and Bess teases her about this. So there's clearly some flirtation going on between George and this engineer guy. So I love that. But also, I'm like, I much prefer the her interactive headcanon that George is actually technical, just all by herself, and she could probably take a look at that carousel and tell you exactly what was going on.
Or, hire a real engineer and not somebody who's like a first-year college student and doesn't actually know enough to be able to judge the inner workings of this carousel, most likely. Anyway.
Right. But anyway, so she says she'll arrange to have this guy look at the carousel. Anyway, after lunch, Nancy goes to the police department and asks Chief McGinnis to look and see how far back this carousel drama started, and then if there's been any other reports of crime at the amusement park around the times when the carousel has started up, because she's interested to see if maybe the carousel is a distraction for other crimes happening on nearby. And so Chief McGinnis agrees to look into that. And afterwards, Nancy comes back home, and Hannah tells her that Joy Trent stopped by while she was out. And so Nancy promises, like, "Ah, forgot, I will definitely reach out to her tomorrow." That evening, Nancy goes to the cookout at the Marvins. George introduces her to Engineer Guy, and he did actually just look over the carousel that afternoon for her and thinks he knows how this carousel trick is done.
Ooh.
He explains to Nancy how remote controls work and how he thinks that that is how the carousel was turned on and off remotely. I'm just saying it's 1988, okay? I don't think remote controls were a new technology in 1988. I mean, to be fair, I was not alive at that time, so I couldn't really tell you, but it seems to me like there have been remote controls since there have been televisions.
You would think. Well, not even like televisions. Remote controls could be used for a lot of different pieces of
Yes.
technology. The technology had to have been there.
Yeah. But anyway, he explains a radio relay kind of situation, and he found a spot where there were some exposed wires where it looks like that would have been attached and that it looks like it's since been removed. So he thinks that, like, this is how it could have happened, but he didn't exactly find evidence for it happening, if that makes sense. The next morning, Nancy tries to reach Joy by phone, as she promised Hannah the other day, but Joy is not at her home. But a rather rude woman, like, answers the phone and tells Nancy that she'll leave a message for Joy. Okay. Then Ned calls. He is back from Emerson, so I guess he was only gone for like a day or something. Anyway, he agrees to meet Nancy at the amusement park. So Nancy goes to the park, and at the park, she notices a woman talking to Leo Novak, and she sees this woman write something down on a piece of paper and hand it to him before she leaves. And so Nancy goes over and asks Mr. Novak who that was. And he kind of brushes this off. He tells Nancy that this woman was just someone interested in all this carousel business. But Nancy kind of thinks to herself that, like, if her interest in the carousel wasn't important, like it was just about like this haunting, she was just like an interested passerby or whatever, why would she write something down and hand it to him? Like, that definitely seems like she has something more important to do with this than Leo is letting on. Nancy also notices that he's wearing an eye patch. So she asks him about it. And Novak says that he got something in his eye last night and his eye's been hurting him. So he's like covering it with an eye patch, I guess, as like some form of treatment for this. But Nancy notices that there is like some slight bruising underneath the eye patch. And so she wonders if maybe the eye patch is covering up a black eye.
Hmm.
Mhm. She also tells Novak this remote control theory that the engineer guy told her about. And he does not believe this and thinks that he would have noticed if something was attached to his control box. But he's also acting super weird and defensive, kind of about everything today. And so Nancy doesn't necessarily believe him. Anyway, she meets up with Ned for lunch, and Ned tells her that his art history professor actually asked him to ask Nancy for a favor. Apparently, his art history professor is writing a book about this recently deceased artist named Walter Cruz. And believe it or not, Cruz used to date the daughter of the original owner of the Carousel with this Mr. Ogden guy. And so he's hoping that he can get his hands on the letters that Cruz sent to his girlfriend. And he saw like the news article about Nancy investigating this carousel business and knew about Cruz's connection to the carousel owner's daughter. He's hoping that Nancy can come across these letters in her investigation and give them to him. And Nancy says that she'll see what she can do. You know, no promises, but if she finds them, she finds them. And then she goes back to the amusement park. And then she ends up getting flagged down by a redheaded girl while she's there. And this is Joy Trent. Finally! Joy tells her that, yes, she has a mystery for Nancy. And she invites Nancy to her house to lunch tomorrow to talk about it more. I guess she doesn't want to talk about it out in public. Interesting. Nancy then goes back to talk more to Leo Novak, and she asks him about Mr. Ogden's daughter for the professor. And Leo says that he remembers her. Her name was Nina Ogden, and he actually bought the carousel horse from her because she inherited it after her father passed away. Unfortunately, he doesn't remember her current last name because she had moved away and gotten married, so he can't really recall what her name is currently. But Nancy figures that she can figure this out by looking into Mr. Ogden's obituary or town hall records or something like that. The next morning, Nancy is actually about to go over to Joy's house when she gets a frantic call from Joy stating that her house has been broken into just that night. And so Nancy agrees to rush over. But first, Nancy gets a call from Chief McGinnis. He's followed up from Nancy's earlier ask about, all the crime in the area. And he says that there was actually a crime that happened just around the time that Nancy was taking out the carousel the other night. Apparently, a boat was stolen from a marina nearby, and he gives Nancy the owner's information so that she can speak to them later about this. So, interesting. Anyway, Nancy then heads to Joy's house, or rather a mansion, because turns out Joy is super rich. She has like a legitimate estate. It's like gated. Nancy goes up a drive. It's a whole thing. But on her way up the drive to Joy's house, she passes a car and she recognized the driver of this car as the woman who was talking to Novak yesterday. Very interesting coincidence. So Nancy gets to the door and she's shown in by a butler. Told you, Joy's rich. And she meets Joy's Aunt Selma, who says that Joy should be here any minute. And Nancy kind of apologizes, a little bit fishing for information here. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry if I cut your visit short with your friend, trying to kind of scope out the situation with the woman who just left. And Joy's aunt gets like super angry, saying that like that woman is no friend of mine.
Oh my gosh.
Yikes.
So this is super awkward, and Nancy's like so intimidated by this reaction from her that she does not ask any follow-up questions at all. And they just sit there in silence until Joy arrives a few minutes later. But at this point, we get the story from Joy all about this burglary last night. The robbers broke in downstairs, surprised the butler, and then the police showed up about 10 minutes later. Thieves had already gotten away, but they didn't steal anything. At least not anything valuable. And it's odd because it doesn't even look like they were like rooting around for valuables. Nothing was like no drawers were open, nothing was rummaged in, and there are valuables in this house just sitting right out in the open and untouched. So very strange. And Joy also mentions to Nancy that she wonders if she was actually followed home the day before when she'd met her at the amusement park, because she noticed a blue car with a man at the wheel that suspiciously stayed behind her for like the whole drive. And she didn't catch a good look at him or the license plate. So, not really much that we can tell from this. But we're going to learn a little bit more about Joy as well here. She is an only child and a recent orphan. Her mother passed away when she was a toddler, and then her father passed away like within the last year or so. And her only relation that she still has is this Aunt Selma, who is her current guardian, obviously, and who we really don't like that much because she's not a pleasant person. And they end up talking about the carousel a little bit, and that is because or that's the reason that Joy decided to reach out to Nancy about the mystery because she saw the article in the paper about her trying to solve the haunting. And Joy actually went to this amusement park as a kid and loved this carousel so much so that her father bought the lead horse for her birthday one year. So this is actually the real reason why the lead horse was replaced. Alrighty. Apparently, her father was an expert machinist and had it like made into this hobby horse. And Joy, again with the caregiving stuff, Joy has lent this horse for like permanent use to a nearby daycare so that the children can have fun with it all the time. And she promises Nancy, like, oh, if you ever want, we'll just go to the daycare and you can see it. But anyway, the reason that Joy has reached out to Nancy is because her father left her a weird letter with a weird riddle in it just before he died. And the letter just says, Iris equals question mark equals old glory. Okay. That doesn't really mean anything to us, but Joy tells us that Iris was her mother's name. And of course, her dad loved her mother very, very deeply and was extremely grief-stricken when she died, so much so that he never really spoke about her, didn't really even talk to Joy about her mother growing up at all, really, but he did, as a way to honor her, I guess, decorated literally everything in the house with irises. And Joy
She's
thinks
actually
that,
so sweet.
yeah, it's heartbreaking.
I know.
But Joy thinks that obviously because Iris was her mother's name, it must have something to do with the solution to this riddle. But otherwise, she doesn't really know where to go with this. So Nancy promises to think it over a little bit and tells Joy that she'll get back to her later. At this point, she goes back to the amusement park
For
because,
the bajillionth time.
yeah, how many trips are we going to make? But she talks to Leo Novak about the story about the lead horse getting sold to Mr. Trent. And he's like, oh, yeah, that did definitely happen. It was just a long time ago. And since then, the lead horse got replaced again after an accident. So I guess we're on horse number 3 now, actually. Whatever. So that's why I guess because that was so long ago, and then the second replacement was more recent. He was like, "Oh, I didn't mention it because I thought you were asking about the second one and not the first one." Whatever. Okay.
Okay.
So that's kind of strange. But so now Nancy is going to go talk to the boat owner at the marina who had his boat stolen the other night. And he says that he was out fishing when he heard the carousel turn on and he left his boat to go check it out. And when he got back, 2 shadowy figures were getting away in it. We've seen 2 shadowy figures before. Could
Right.
it be the same people who were also on the carousel horse that night? Like, did they well, we don't think that they started it up because it was kind of surprising to them as well, but did they come to the
Mhm.
carousel to do something there, but then also just happen to steal the boat to get away? Or
Mhm.
was stealing the boat the original, like, intended crime in the first place? Was it all of it just done for the sake of getting a distraction to steal the boat? We don't know. So, anyway, the boat owner does also say that the police did end up finding his boat abandoned downriver, so he has already gotten it back. So, we're all good. So Nancy gets back home and gets a mysterious phone call, and it is actually that woman that we saw talking to Leo initially, and then who we saw leaving the Trent home yesterday. The one that Joy's Aunt Selma did not like very much. She refuses to identify herself, but asks Nancy to meet her at a tea room in town. So obviously we are going to go because Nancy is just eaten alive by this curiosity to find out what this woman wants or who she is. So we get there, and the woman still will not tell us who she is, but she does ask Nancy to deliver a box to Joy for her. And Nancy's like,
Uh, you won't
what?
tell
Like,
me who you are.
yeah, I don't know what you are or what this is. Like, is this anthrax?
Yeah,
What is this?
seriously.
Like, and the woman's like, oh, no, you can open the box. And so Nancy does, and it's just like a box from a florist. So she proves that it's not dangerous. So Nancy agrees to do this. She takes the box to Joy, and when Joy opens it, she realizes this is a box of irises. And there's also a card in the box that she didn't want us to know her name, but the name was in the box. The card identifies this woman as Rose Harrod. And the card says that Joy can reach her at a nearby hotel. So Joy thinks that maybe this has something to do with her father's riddle, right? So she gets really excited. She goes to call the hotel, but her aunt stops her and is like, absolutely not. This woman who sent the flowers, clearly this is a fraud. Don't do this. So Joy gets really upset at her aunt and thinks it's unreasonable to refuse to let her to talk to the woman. And Nancy does kind of think that this is a little bit sketchy as well, honestly, but does not get involved in the drama between Joy and her aunt, which kind of escalates from
Mhm.
there. And Joy ends up dropping the bomb that her aunt is only declared her temporary guardian until she's 21, and that could change in the meantime. So basically, like, back off. Don't
Right.
tell me what to do with my life.
Can we talk about this though? Because
Yes.
this is wild to me.
Yeah.
So she's over 18
Yeah.
and she has a guardian. I don't know why when I read it like before this point in the book, I thought she was maybe younger, that she was like 16 or
Right.
something.
Nope.
But no, she's fully an adult and somehow she still has to have a guardian. I
Mhm.
looked this up because I was so curious about this. I was like, was this a thing like in the 80s? Like if you were like a young woman without like and your parents passed away that you could be put into someone's guardianship until you were 21. I couldn't find anything about it really. I did find that the age of majority used to be 21 before the 70s.
Mm.
And then that changed to 18 like in the early 70s, but that's way before this book was ever published and put out.
Mm.
And so I don't know if this is just a holdover. I don't know. I mean, at this point, the digests are firmly being published by Simon and Schuster.
Right.
I thought maybe it would have been Harriet Stratemeyer Adams ism thing of just
Mhm.
like kind of an old fashioned
Sure.
thing that got
Yeah.
left in there, but it's out of her hands at this point. It's Simon and
Well, she'd been
Schuster.
dead for 5 years already.
Right.
Yeah,
So
so
that doesn't seem possible. Simon and Schuster should have caught that if
mhm.
so I have no idea what this is about.
Maybe it's a financial thing only, like,
Yeah.
she has an inheritance
Mhm.
and she can't
Right.
access it until she's 21 and just also happens to live with her aunt.
But that seems
That seems strange.
weird too.
It
Like
seems like a stretch.
yeah, because they don't say like trustee. They don't talk about like a trust or anything like that. They
Mm-mm.
say her legal guardian, and they're pretty clear cut about it being a guardianship. And I know that like for individuals like who are potentially like developmentally delayed or like have some kinds of disabilities, you might put like a guardianship into a will or something like that. But
But that's different than what's going
that's
on here,
different than what's going
clearly.
on here. It's bizarre.
Maybe they just wanted to have an excuse for
But
this
then
aunt.
just make her younger. I feel like it would have been super adequate if she was 16 and wanted to reach out to Nancy. And Nancy could have palled around with a 16-year-old. That wouldn't have been weird for Nancy.
But this is weird.
This
I
is
don't get why
weird.
they did this. Yeah.
I don't understand this. I want to ask someone about this so badly.
Yeah.
Because it feels to me, when I read this, it feels to me like it's a sexist thing.
Yeah.
Like it feels like, okay, well, because she's a young woman, she has to be under someone's guardianship.
Mhm.
And I feel like I remember something about this, but I can't quite put my finger on what it is that I'm remembering. But like, women weren't really able to like get a line of credit until like,
Mhm.
just like a few years before this, maybe like I
Right.
think in the late 70s or something. And so like it feels like one of those things, like one of those legal things that like I'm sure there was some kind of precedent for like those middling years before a woman gets married,
Mhm.
that she might have to be under someone's guardianship. And so I'm wondering if there's something to do with that, but I couldn't find anything in my research. So if you know, please seriously email us at regularnacydrew@gmail.com. I'm so interested.
I
I
know, I'm
want
so
to know.
curious. Oh my gosh.
Anyway, sorry.
So for whatever reason, Aunt Selma's in charge here, but it sounds like there is something in her father's will, question mark, that could allow her to change guardians if she's not happy with the situation or if Aunt Selma doesn't do a good enough job. I'm not really sure what the specifics are of that, but obviously we're upset with Aunt Selma here for not letting Joy do the things that she wants to do. And it gets pretty awkward. So Nancy just excuses herself to go back home where Bess and George stop by. They actually invite Nancy to a slumber party on the houseboat tonight, the one that the Custer children were staying on. Or the Custer family was staying on, but the family's not going to be there tonight and they're not babysitting or anything. It's just going to be Nancy, Bess, and George on the boat. So they head over, they all agree to go, and it's a nice evening or whatever. They have fun on their boat. Eventually, they all go to bed, and Nancy's awoken in the middle of the night because she feels the boat like moving more than it should be. It's just like moored in its little slip on the dock or whatever, and it shouldn't be moving around this much. So she kind of gets out of bed and goes to look and sees that they have become unmoored from the dock. Wonderful. So she goes out onto the deck and sees that there is a large boat bearing down on them because, of course, also we don't have any lights on the
Right.
boat because it's the middle of the night. It's not even running right
Yeah.
now. Oh, okay. So she wakes up Bess and George. She's like running through the boat, screaming and like trying to like get to where the lights are in the boat so that they can flash their lights at the other boat. And the operator of the other boat like gets to them and he gets mad at them that they don't have their lights on. But then they kind of like explain like what happened and he offers to tow them back to the marina. So George goes to get the tow rope and she finds that this was no accident. Someone intentionally cut this so that they'd be set adrift.
Unbelievable. But anyway, this other bigger boat does help them get back to the marina, and they're all fine and safe and everything. And the next day, Nancy decides that she's going to go speak to Joy's lawyer because she asked Carson, and he arranged a meeting with him upon Nancy's request. And so Nancy asks, it's like Joy's family attorney, so it's also like her father's attorney. And she asks this lawyer about this whole guardianship situation. I wish this actually lent any clarity to us about why she has to have a guardian until she's 21, but
Right.
it doesn't. Um, he says to Nancy that he obviously can't talk about it in depth, right? Because Joy is a current client. That would be unethical. But he does say, which I don't understand how this is not talking about it, but whatever, dude. He does say that there are certain conditions in Joy's father's will that, if they're met, might mean that Aunt Selma would no longer be her guardian.
Hmm.
Very vague, but interesting. So Nancy wants to go talk to Joy again about this, probably try to learn more about what the heck this is about. But on her way home, she stops, or on her way to Joy's home, she stops at the police department first. Nancy had asked Chief McGinnis to see if there were any fingerprints found on the stolen boat. You know how those two shadowy figures stole that guy's boat? She asked him to see if there were fingerprints. And indeed, there were, and it turns out that the boat thieves were none other than Baldy Crabs and Fingers Malone. Go figure.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought? The only two known criminals are the two criminals who did this. So,
Crazy.
yeah. So these were probably the shadowy figures that Ned and Nancy chased from the carousel. So why were they on the carousel? Are Baldy and Fingers interested in the carousel for some reason? I'm sorry, I can't get over calling them Baldy and Fingers.
I know.
Nancy speaks with Detective Norris as well, so the detective from St. Louis, and she learns that Fingers Malone actually has a history of operating in amusement parks, including an amusement park in St. Louis. Interesting, whatever. We'll learn more about that later. And then afterwards, Nancy goes to talk to Joy. Joy invites her into her father's study so that they can kind of discuss this secretly away from Joy's aunt. And now that they are in Mr. Trent's study, Nancy spots something very interesting. On the wall of his study is this painting of a Civil War battle, which, why are old men so obsessed with the Civil War? Someone explained to me. Anyway, Nancy notices that in this Civil War painting, there's the flag in it, right? They're holding the flag, this old American flag, Old Glory, commonly referred to as Old Glory, right? Also, she notices that the way the flag is like oriented in the painting kind of points to something that's on a nearby shelf, which is a vase that has an iris in it.
Huh.
Nancy is like super sure that this has to be somehow related to Joy's riddle. It's just like too coincidental, right? There's a picture of Old Glory on the wall of his office pointing to an iris. Too coincidental. So this is still percolating in her mind, so she doesn't bring it up quite yet, but she wants to go look at this carousel horse at the daycare now because she also thinks that this might have something to do with it too. And she does ask Joy about like this carousel horse and is like, what do you remember about it? And Joy happens to remember that, oh yeah, didn't I used to call the carousel horse Glory? Didn't I name it Glory? And didn't I also sometimes refer to it as Old Glory?
Joy, come on.
She was really little, I think, at the time when she had this horse, but like still. So yeah, so they decide, okay, let's book it over to the daycare center to go look at this thing. And they do. Nancy actually rides it. It's really funny.
Is that the scene on your cover of the book?
Oh,
Just at the daycare center? I'm just kidding.
No, it's definitely not. She's on a
No.
full-size carousel, but
Yeah.
but it's just funny thinking of Nancy Drew getting on like a children's hobby horse and riding it like.
Yeah.
Sorry. This is a podcast. I recognize you can't see me right now. I was pantomiming riding a toy hobby horse. All right. Anyway, it is a beautiful horse, but Nancy realizes that it does not seem to be made in the same style as the rest of the carousel horses either. So this must mean that this carousel horse that her dad bought for her isn't the original carousel horse. So it's like, what?
Where is it? Where is the original? Are we at 4 horses now?
Yes. Does that mean that Leo Novak lied to her and that the horse has been replaced more than twice? Like 3 times? Like, is that what we're talking about?
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, and Nancy also wonders, like, if Baldy and Fingers were, because they were on the carousel, right? Were they looking for this horse? And also because remember, Joy's house was broken into and nothing was stolen. So could the burglars, could they have been Fingers and Baldy, and could they have been looking for this horse at Joy's home?
Seems like it.
Connecting dots, connecting dots.
Yes.
And if that's the case, that they are looking for this horse, that certainly seems to suggest that there is something about this horse that is incredibly valuable. So what is that? So they go back to Joy's house, though, because Nancy has a thought, right? She realizes Old Glory is the name of the old American flag. We realize that. But also, an iris, the flower an iris, is also sometimes called a flag. I didn't know this.
I didn't know this either.
But I think it's, I don't know, another name for an iris. And there's a small figurine in Joy's father's office with a flag. So could the clue, this whole Old Glory equals question mark equals iris, be trying to refer them back to flag, as in the flag in Joy's father's office?
Genius.
So they go back to the office and they go and they look at that little flag, and they find something wrapped around the tiny flagpole. So there's a small little piece of tissue paper, and when they unravel it, there is a drawing of a horse with a frog sitting on its back. This is another riddle, and it has stumped the two of them, but didn't stump me. You know why, Kori? You know why?
Why?
Because I have played Secret of Shadow Ranch.
Yes.
And I know what a frog is on a horse.
Perfect. Yes. Yeah,
Anyway. Anyway,
it made me think of that as well.
I was like, I get it. I know I can solve this riddle.
Yes.
Made me feel so smart. So thank you so much to Nancy Drew PC Games. It was one of those things I learned because of Nancy Drew moments.
Honestly, she should have already known this, because by this point, Nancy has already solved The Secret of Shadow Ranch, the book.
Anyway, so yes, so they can't figure this out, but Nancy is starting to form this theory about the carousel haunting, and she's also starting to form a plan. So she heads out to enact it. First, she heads to the library and checks out a book on the art of Walter Cruz, which is like, seems really weird and random. What does he have to do with this carousel? We don't know.
Is he supposed to be Kessler?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. This is, obviously the guy that the professor asked her to track down the letters for, but what does he have to do with the rest of it? We don't know. But she checks out this book, and her hunch is somehow proven by what she sees in this book. But we as the reader aren't let in on what that is. So whatever. She decides, now that she knows this, she's going to put her plan in motion. And it takes a lot of help. She first calls the director of a local museum who is a friend. We don't know what she talks to him about, though. We don't know what that conversation is about. She then calls the same reporter who she set up that bet with at the beginning of the book and asks him if he can put an article in the paper about, and a story on the news as well, like do an article and a news story about the carousel horse that Joy donated to the daycare center. And he agrees.
This feels like a really big ask.
I know.
Like, I feel like the news station would be like, what? We're not taking our programming instructions from you. We'll do what stories we want to. Thank you.
Right. Well, and also, like, I don't know how the guy who works for the newspaper would have any influence over what, like, a television news station airs.
No.
And then also, I'm pretty sure it's like that day she calls to see if he can do it before the newspaper goes out that night.
Can you drop everything and write this article for me, and then just stick it in there somewhere? Front page,
Which he
preferably.
Does. Yeah, he does. But it's like, is that, how fast are newspapers printed? Can you even do that? Like, I don't know.
Had to have been close. Oh my gosh.
Anyway, but he does. I guess because he also really wants to see the mystery solved.
Of course.
But whatever. Then she also recruits Bess, and they stage this run-in with Leo Novak, and Bess lets it slip that Nancy has found this missing carousel horse at the daycare, and that, Nancy thinks that this is going to be the end of the haunting. And Leo has a ton of questions, but then Nancy shows up and kind of just convinces Bess to, like, leave so that they don't answer any of his questions. They're just kind of vague and leave him hanging. So interesting.
Love it.
Then afterwards, I think this sets the plan thoroughly in motion. And then afterwards, Nancy takes Ned to the hotel where the strange woman, Rose Harrod, is apparently staying. She wants to leave a message for this woman telling her that Joy is going to be reaching out to her soon because I guess Joy has asked her to do this, maybe. But when she gets to the hotel, she learns from the clerk that Rose Harrod is missing. Apparently, Rose left a note at the desk yesterday saying that she was heading out, but she would be back soon. But then she never came back. This kind of derails everything for a minute, for a hot
Yes.
minute.
So Nancy talks to the hotel clerk on duty who took the message from Rose, and he remembers the entire conversation. Apparently, someone called for Miss Harrod right before she went out, and it was a man on the phone who said he had information about Joy Trent, and that if Miss Harrod wanted the information, she should meet up with him at a coffee shop by the airport. Or in the airport, I guess. And the man was going to have a mustache and would be holding a cane, so that's how she can recognize him. And apparently, Miss Harrod went directly there, but did not return. So Nancy and Ned rushed to the airport to check out this coffee shop, and they learned from a waitress there that the waitress did see the mustache man and Miss Harrod arrive. Miss Harrod did indeed visit with this man with the cane yesterday. As soon as they arrived, they ordered a coffee, and then soon after, the woman got really, really ill and was let outside by the man. And then she noticed out the window that another blonde man, like, came up and was like, "Hey, do you need help with her?" And then both of the guys, like, got her into a car and drove away. Great. So this definitely sounds like she was drugged and kidnapped, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Nancy and Ned go out to talk to the parking lot attendant who noticed all this fishy business and got a little concerned. And I think the parking lot attendant also asked if they needed help and was told to, like, get away.
Mm-hmm.
So he was like, "Oh, that's fishy," and wrote down the license plate number. Thank you very much, parking lot attendant person. So Nancy calls up Chief McGinnis and asks him to put an APB out on the car. A few hours later, the chief gets back to Nancy and says that the car was reported stolen yesterday and was just found abandoned in a nearby town. Nancy and Ned track this all the way to a cabin outside of town, and they knock, but there is no answer. Although Nancy does feel like she hears something coming from inside, like a moaning sound almost. So Ned knocks the door down, and they see inside Miss Harrod is tied up and gagged on a cot. So yeah, she was drugged and kidnapped. Yeah.
Horrifying.
No one else seems to be around. Like, the bad guys aren't here with her. So they rush over, check her out. She's barely conscious, clearly needs some medical attention. So Ned carries her out and they take her to the hospital.
Gotta love Ned sometimes.
Yes. Thank you, Ned, for being actually really useful in this situation.
Yes.
But the doctor, that when they get to the hospital, the doctor does agree that she's been drugged and decides that they need to keep her overnight for observation while she kind of lets this wear off of her system. But Nancy is obviously not done with her work yet, so they leave her at the hospital and they arrange to go meet with the reporter and George's electrical engineering boyfriend and also the amusement park police officer, Officer Doyle. And then they decide that they're all going to meet at that same spot that they had used to stake out the carousel the other night, where she and Ned were. Same exact spot. We're going to be there at 11 p.m. tonight. So Nancy goes to the police station because she needs to borrow their walkie-talkies.
Yes, ma'am, Miss Drew. Here you go.
Thank you. Any other equipment we can get for you while you're here? Thank you very much.
Also, like, they're police walkie-talkies, so they're gonna be like, aren't they connected to like central like dispatch and stuff? Like,
You would think.
I don't understand this.
Yeah.
But okay.
Oh my gosh. So then we go to Joy's house and we get the key to the daycare center from her. I don't know why Joy has the keys to the whole daycare center, but she does. So Nancy and Ned go to the daycare, and obviously Nancy's hope is that the news story that she's put out will entice the burglars to come here because clearly this is what they're looking for, and she's going to trick them into breaking in. So Nancy and Ned are at this daycare center. They're staking it out, but it's already 11 o'clock now. So we need to go meet up with everyone else at the amusement park. And when we get there, the reporter guy is absolutely thrilled to be part of what seems like is going to be his big scoop or whatever. And the engineer guy reports to Nancy that she was right. And it does seem like there's an electrical relay switch attached to the carousel control box, just the way he thought it would be. And so Nancy thanks them and gives everyone some kind of instructions that, of course, are kept secret from us, the reader. And then she goes back over to Ned. They wait a little bit longer at the daycare center in hiding, and then suddenly Nancy overhears her walkie-talkie. Officer Doyle comes on the line and says, "The trap has been sprung." So Nancy gets up and goes back to the amusement park, whatever. And when we get there, she sees Leo Novak with her like group of helpers or whatever. And they say that the carousel lit up and started going just like it does when it's haunting. But Leo Novak says he came out afterwards and didn't see anything. So the engineer guy goes over to check, and sure enough, the radio relay switch is gone now. That's very strange. So Nancy looks over at Officer Doyle, and he turns to Leo Novak and is like, "Empty your pockets."
Ooh.
And he gets like really defensive and is like, "I don't have to do anything, blah, blah, blah." And they're like, "No, empty your pockets." And eventually he does. And they find the radio relay device and a transmitter. So Leo Novak is responsible for his own hauntings. Nancy doesn't have time to celebrate this solving of this part of the case, though, because Ned comes through over on the walkie-talkie because he's still back at the daycare center, and he says, "You need to get here fast." So she does. She races over there. She quietly sneaks over to where Ned has been hiding, and he tells her that a car has been circling the building and then parked, and he thinks that the two people are inside the daycare. So they look in through the windows, and sure enough, they do see a small light moving through the rooms, clearly looking for the carousel horse. And Ned and Nancy, of course, they have the key, so they just kind of quietly slip inside. And inside, they see two men, one with a cane and a mustache, like the airport coffee shop guy, and one who is a blonde guy. And they are in there, as we expected. They are looking over Joy's carousel horse. They're like fiddling with the saddle a little bit, and they're kind of talking to each other. They seem like they're confused, like they're not really sure if what they're doing is what they're supposed to be doing. They're referring to some letter that they have, but Nancy can't really hear exactly what they're saying because it's too muffled. And unfortunately, at this moment, Ned slips and falls, which alerts the bad guys to their presence.
Ned! God! See, he's really helpful sometimes, and then sometimes he just just does stuff like this.
Oh my gosh. So all four of them get into a physical fight. Nancy and Ned start losing, obviously, because Ned was like already on the ground in the first place. And then another man comes into the daycare, and Nancy's like, "Darn it, we can't handle three bad guys against us two." And she like expects this guy to like come at her and try to hurt her, right? But he ends up going after the bad guys.
Woo!
It turns out this is Mr. Franz. Remember the carousel expert that Nancy met in the park days ago? Yeah, he was just here and happened to jump in to help Nancy and Ned. So anyway, he's not actually a carousel expert at all. He's really an insurance investigator.
Yes.
And he's here for a very specific reason that he will not tell us. And Nancy guesses what the reason is. And
doesn't tell us either.
Yeah, she won't tell us either, but she knows that it's something to do with the carousel horse, but wants to get everyone together so that she can explain it all at one time.
So he knows why he's here, and she knows why he's here. They
But we
both
still
know
don't.
that each other knows.
Yeah.
But she won't say it until tomorrow. So
Yeah. Stay tuned. But also, we unmask the bad guys from their wigs and mustaches, and it is none other than Fingers and Baldy.
Of course.
Of course.
The only two criminals that we have known about from the very beginning. Duh.
Spoiler alert, the suspects are the criminals. Anyway, so they get arrested and they're hauled away. And then, of course, the next day, Nancy gathers everyone so that she can have her big dramatic reveal at the end, right? We're at the daycare center now, actually, because we have to do this in front of the carousel horse. This horse is actually a really incredibly valuable piece of art. Unlike all the other horses, it was carved by the now very famous artist, Walter Cruz. And the local museum curator also confirmed that this is Cruz's work, and they estimate that the horse is worth like thousands of dollars. And at the time that the horse was made, Cruz was actually working for Ogden. Remember, the original Carousel horse's owner, and he was the guy dating Ogden's daughter. So he carved it as a favor to Ogden when the original horse was damaged in that accident that we heard about earlier. Last year, when Cruz's art was getting really popular, Novak realized that the horse he had on it was now his horse, right? It was carved by Cruz, and so therefore must be this valuable horse. The only problem is that the horse was sold, obviously, already to Joy's father, but he couldn't remember Joy's father's name or Joy's name. So he brought the carousel back to River Heights and cooked up the whole haunting plot. One, because it would get him publicity and therefore business, but also to hopefully get Joy to come back to the park, maybe out of nostalgia or something. And he thinks that he could definitely recognize her again because he'd met Joy when she was really little, and that hair is really recognizable. Also, I don't know if we said
No, we
earlier,
didn't.
Joy has heterochromia, which means she
Right.
has two different eye colors. I don't know if that was actually carried over into the game. If she
No, I don't
did,
think
I
so.
never noticed it. But
Yeah.
yeah, apparently Joy is physically very easily recognizable, and so he just started these hauntings in hopes that she would show up one day. Then, of course, Fingers and Baldy spoiled his plan a little bit because they were also looking for the carousel horse too, but for a different reason. It turns out that Fingers pickpocketed some very expensive diamonds from a jeweler who was visiting the amusement park once upon a time. I don't know why this jeweler kept his diamond stock on him when he visited the
Seriously.
amusement park. Um,
It's like pickpocketing 101. Like, look for the guy carrying diamonds, like
yeah,
raw, uncut diamonds in his pocket.
great. Oh my gosh.
Theft prevention 101. Don't carry raw, uncut gems on your person just
Right.
when you're out and about if you can
Right.
avoid it. Like,
Oh my gosh. Oh.
oh.
So Fingers steals the jewels, but because he was like on the run from the police, he gave them to his friend to stash. And his friend was none other than Walter Cruz.
Mm.
And Walter Cruz hid them inside his carousel horse that he was currently in the process of making. And then later, Fingers went to prison. Walter sent him a letter telling him where he can find the diamonds. And so now, pretty much ever since, he's been trying to track down the carousel horse. And then when he saw the news stories about the carousel horse being here, he came with Baldy to try to get the diamonds back, right? And the insurance company, of course, has also been trying to track down these diamonds ever since as well, which is why the insurance guy came here undercover. Apparently, insurance guy just had to do a lot of research about the horse or the carousel horse itself in order to find the diamonds. I don't know that that was necessarily necessary, but it allowed him to pose as somebody else.
Yeah.
Whatever. Because he'd heard that Fingers had been spotted here in the area recently, and he was hoping that Fingers would just like lead him to where the diamonds were, and then he would get him back that way. So anyway, Nancy and Ned see Fingers and Baldy examining the carousel, but when they couldn't find the right horse, they confronted Novak and gave him that black eye that he was trying to cover.
Right.
And then they also followed Joy back to her house that one day and broke in, and obviously they weren't able to find the carousel horse that they were looking for because it wasn't there. It was at the daycare. So Nancy puts out the word that the carousel horse was here in order to trap them, and then when they got here, they couldn't actually find the diamonds. And that is because Joy's father, who, remember, he had taken that carousel horse and remade it into the hobby horse, that required him to kind of take some things apart.
Right.
And in the process, he found the diamonds.
Okay, so here's where things take a turn. Because I feel like that all makes sense, right? It's maybe a little bit convoluted hearing it all at once, but like ultimately, I feel like that story makes sense.
Sure.
Here's where things I think stop making sense for me. But so anyway, yeah, so that was what the riddle was about mostly, right? It was trying to lead Joy to this carousel horse so that she could get the diamonds. But also, Nancy realized that this frog on the horse riddle was actually referring to the real frogs on horses, i.e., the soft part of the horse's foot. And of course, in this particular carousel carving, only one foot is raised. So she knows that it is probably that foot that it's referring to. And so, oh my God, Nancy literally, like, with no one's permission, gets her nail file out of her purse and starts gouging away at this, by the way, very expensive carousel horse's foot. But anyway, she pops that thing open, and inside is a small bottle which contains the diamonds. And she hands those diamonds over to the police and the insurance investigator. But there's also a letter in the carousel horse's foot addressed to Joy. And so Nancy gives Joy the letter to read, but I think Joy is like too distraught to read it herself or whatever. It's from her father. It's really sad. It's about like how much she loved her mother and all this stuff. And Joy starts talking about how she's so sad that she doesn't have any pictures of her mother to remember her by. And Nancy is like, well, yeah, you don't have any photographs, but you do have someone actually who looks remarkably like her. And Joy's like, what the heck are you talking about, Nancy? And then in walks Rose Herod. Because apparently she is Joy's mother's, Iris's twin sister. What? Okay, but then we learn this whole story from this letter about kind of the truth of Joy's mother. So turns out she and Joy's father got married kind of against her parents' wishes because they thought at the time that Joy's father, Mr. Trent, was not like high class enough to marry Joy's mom. He did eventually, of course, become a very successful machinist and like open his own business or whatever. But at the time they married, he did not really have any money or anything. And so they were against it. But they snuck off and got married anyway. And they were very happy together and everything. But then shortly after they had Joy, her mother got very sick. And basically the only way they could save her life was through this expensive operation, which they could not afford at the time. And so they decided to approach Joy's parents to ask for the money for Joy to have, or sorry, not Joy's parents, Iris's parents. They approached Iris's parents for the money to have this really expensive operation, and they agreed to pay for it, but only if Joy's father, Mr. Trent, agreed to like disappear and leave their daughter entirely alone, never come back.
No.
And so he's faced with this really horrible choice, between saving the love of his life's life and never seeing her again or letting her die. And so
never mind that Joy was already born. And so it
Right?
also necessitated like getting Joy out of the picture as well, sending your own granddaughter away.
Well, I
Horrible.
don't know that they planned on this, but so what happens is he does agree to leave and he takes Joy with him. So I
Yes,
don't
yeah.
know if they meant for him to do that or not, but he does. He disappears. He changes their name even, I think, so that they can't find them. But because his wife, she did end up having this operation, and I think it was successful, but it ended up leaving her basically extremely disabled. She couldn't get out of bed. I don't even think she could communicate anymore. And so she had no way of contacting them. And she did eventually pass away soon after that. So it's just really like devastating and this
Awful.
whole thing. And so basically this letter is explaining all of that and telling Joy that the reason why he sent her on this scavenger hunt was that, or this riddle solving quest or whatever, is that if she ever did meet her mother's sister, that if she chose to, she could choose to have her mother's sister be her guardian instead of her aunt. And lo and behold, when all of like this new stuff started popping up, Iris's sister Rose saw all this happening, and actually has also like gotten out of touch with her own parents because they also disapproved of her own marriage. Like weirdly, like coincidentally, they didn't like the guy she married either, and so she went no contact with them. So she didn't even know really about like the whole drama with her sister or whatever and her niece until like years after the fact. And so years after the fact, she always wanted to track down her niece, but never, because they changed their name, could never figure out where they were, what happened. And then when this news story came out, she saw Joy's photo in the newspaper, and she like, that looks exactly like my sister, and tried to go track her down. And eventually, because she saw this new newspaper article about the carousel being haunted, she thought that maybe Joy might be nearby somewhere in River Heights, and so she came all the way here to find her.
Oh.
I know. And she ended up approaching Novak about it because he's the carousel owner, and that's the piece of paper she was handing to him. She was trying to tell him, hey, if you see Joy, like, give her my contact information so that I can get in touch with her. But Novak thought that she was after the carousel horse instead. He didn't think she was just looking to reconnect with Joy. He thought she was trying to get to the valuable carousel horse. And so he told Baldy and Fingers about her and told them where she was staying, and then Baldy and Fingers drugged and kidnapped her.
I hope Novak is also charged for the kidnapping as well, because that makes him an
Seriously.
accessory. That's unacceptable to give away her
Seriously.
location like that.
But of course, prior to that, Rose was able to track down Joy's name herself, and then she met with her Aunt Selma. We remember that. But of course, she was rebuffed by her Aunt Selma because apparently Joy's Aunt Selma and her whole father's side of the family hates her mother's side of the family, which is, I mean, kind of rightfully so.
Go figure, yeah.
Yeah, but of course she doesn't know that, like, her aunt has also cut off contact with her.
Right, yeah.
Her family, you know. And she didn't want Joy to have anything to do with her. And so, yeah, so that explains that. But then suddenly Joy's family's lawyer shows up and he pronounces that now Joy has a choice, right? Because this is the situation that her father wrote into his will. And she can choose whether or not she'd prefer to stay under her Aunt Selma's care or to go under her Aunt Rose's care. And we don't actually get an answer to what Joy chooses here, but she and her Aunt Rose tearfully embrace. It's a very touching moment. And Nancy thinks to herself that even though Baldy and Fingers still have yet to be tried, there is at least one case that has been settled outside of court. So, yeah, that's the end.
Happy ending for Joy, at least, I guess.
Happy ending, I guess. Happy, but like bittersweet, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Still really sad. It's like a sad situation. Yeah, with like just the family dynamics and everything. I cannot imagine being put in the position that her father was put in.
Yeah.
Like, what evil people.
Awful. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, wild.
Why couldn't he have just told Joy about her aunt?
I don't know.
Like maybe when he was alive, or just in the letter, like, why did we have to go through the whole riddle thing? It seems a little...
Well, okay, so I think part of the reason, they talk about this before, part of the reason why he doesn't talk about her mother at all is because it's too painful for him.
Sure.
And so maybe it's just because he really couldn't have a conversation about it. He had to like write it down. But then I don't know, why the riddle? Why not just write a letter?
Just say, hey, by the way, you have an aunt I never told you about.
Yeah.
If you can ever track her down,
yeah,
here's what I know about her. You can go live with her if you want to. Like, it's that easy.
And like, why the hiding of the diamonds? Like, why does that even matter at all? Because clearly they're already wealthy and well off. He's some like, wealthy business owner, successful, whatever. Joy is incredibly well off. That's not a problem. It's not an issue. They don't need the money. And so it's not like he was trying to hide it from someone else and that Joy was the only one who could like solve it so that only she could get the money or something. But I mean, unless there's like some subtext about Aunt Selma being after Joy's money that I'm not picking up.
Right.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's not like the diamonds really change much for Joy's life. She's okay without them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we want to talk about the game, actually?
Yeah. Let's do that. So similarities and differences, right? Obviously, no Fingers or Baldy.
Right.
But we do kind of get like a little bit of a criminal connection. We do get the jewels hidden at the amusement park. I mean, not diamonds, but jewelry hidden in an amusement park. We get that. Also, Nancy talks to a detective in St. Louis.
That's true, yeah.
That's a part of the game. So I appreciate that. You get that connection there, but there is no like direct criminal interaction, or Baldy and Fingers aren't there, it's not the criminals who are chasing her or like responsible for the bad things that are happening. But we do have like that whole subplot with Harlan where Nancy suspects him because he's on parole,
Mhm.
and she like ends up investigating whether or not he was cellmates with the guy who was responsible for the original
Yes.
theft, I believe. And but that turns out not to be the case.
Mhm.
But definitely you could see where they were kind of trying to get the influence from Fingers and Baldy being like these career criminals and working together, right, to do that. So I like that,
Mhm. Of course, Glory was Glory the
right?
horse in the game as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know that we actually learn the mom's name. Like, the irises were not a part of the game at all. It really
No.
was just Dad, the inventor, built Miles, which I did like that they
Mhm.
kept him the inventor as well. Built
Mhm.
Miles to give Joy this series of riddles, which is not the same riddle that we get in the book. And then eventually she's able to figure out from there
Yeah.
where everything is.
I really liked that. I feel like I mean, obviously there is a difference there. There's really only one riddle in the
In the book,
in the
yeah.
book. I mean, I guess two if you consider the frog and the horse to be separate.
Mhm.
Like so I guess two. But I much prefer the series of riddles that the
Yeah.
game gives us because I think it's more fun, right? It
They're
gives
so
us more
fun.
steps. And I feel like the riddle solving, well, riddle solving is the only fun part of the game. The but sorry. Ooh, that sounded bad. I
No, no, you also get to eat ice cream. That's
right.
fun. And do
Ordering
some,
room service is also a fun part of the game, you're right.
the shorthand was kind of fun to.
Oh, I hate the
Oh,
shorthand.
never mind. Okay.
Ugh. Quah.
It's a little
Um,
tedious.
yes.
Yeah. Once you get into it, it's
um,
okay.
but what was I saying? Yeah, but I like that they chose to kind of extend that and make that the focus instead of the focus being on, I guess, God, I don't even really know what I could say the focus of the mystery solving was in the book. Just
Just
going
going to the
back and
amusement
forth
park
to the amusement
10,000
park.
times. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Driving
Yeah.
here, driving here. Oh, you need to come back. Oh, wait, go back over here.
Mhm.
Yep. Airport.
And really, it's that in the book, it's really Joy's riddle that cracks the case, but
Right.
it's not the riddle solving that does it. You know what
No.
I mean? It's more of using the riddle as a clue to
Mhm.
understanding kind of what the whole situation is. It's
Right.
not the riddle in and of itself that solves the mystery. So, yeah, interesting.
I think I like the game just as much as I like the book,
Yeah.
which is just
Which is
it's
not
just
much.
okay.
Which
Yeah,
is
it's just
just an
okay.
average amount.
Yeah.
Yes.
Again, it's not, like, bad, there's
No.
just nothing stand out about it,
Mhm.
so.
I feel like the solution to this mystery, even though I don't think it was explained to us particularly well, I liked it,
Yeah.
right? Like, I think it is a very complicated situation, but I think when you kind of map it out, it makes complete sense.
Mhm.
And I don't think there's a whole lot of holes in the solution to the mystery. Like, I'm
Right.
not left scratching my head about why did this person do this? I don't understand, except kind of Joy's dad.
Mhm.
But other than that, you know, I feel like it makes a whole lot of sense. I don't love the solution to the game mystery.
Hmm.
I just think it's not super compelling. I mean, really, so yes, spoiler. I'm sure we'll put a spoiler alert at the beginning of this episode anyway, but so spoiler, the guy who did it is an employee of the amusement park is Elliot,
Mhm.
and he's really just doing it to earn more money because he's not paid enough.
Yeah.
Which is I feel like is a normal motive. But when I say normal, I mean grounded in reality. Lots of people commit crime for money.
Sure.
That's a thing. But I just feel like it's not interesting for a Nancy Drew game. I feel like we don't play Nancy Drew games or read Nancy Drew books for straightforward crime.
No.
Like we want some complexity to it. We want to feel like we are scratching our heads. Whereas I
Mhm.
feel like in the game, it's just kind of obvious,
Mhm. Yeah.
and because either it's Elliot doing it for money, it's Harlan doing it for money, or it's Ingrid doing it for money. Like
Right.
there is no other suspect or possible
Right.
motive. It's like
It's not Joy, so it's got yeah.
right. And so even it could have been any of them, and it would have felt the same. It wasn't a big confusing situation. It was just which one of you is doing it.
Mhm.
and narrowing that down. So, like, I prefer the book's resolution than the game's resolution, but I
Mhm.
prefer the way the game solves the mystery than the way the book solves the mystery, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah.
I will say the game, just the actual catching of the bad guy
Oh,
is probably, to me, one of the most iconic endings of the
scary.
game series, just because of how you, like, pop that sign out and he whoop back into
Yes.
the hole. It's just such a
Feet, yes.
yeah, it's just a
Yes.
funny animation. I just love it's just so funny.
It's true. That's the
Yeah.
best. That I take it back.
Yeah.
That's the best part of the game.
Yes,
Not
absolutely.
the riddles, not the ordering room service. It is watching Elliot fall backwards into
Into the
that
trap
hole.
door. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh,
Yeah.
that reminds me, you wanted to talk about the blurb on the back of the book.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for reminding me. The blurb on the back of the book that we read to you in the last episode to kind of give us a little bit of a hint as to what this would be about is not what happens in this book.
No.
I don't know. I know that the person who writes the back of these books doesn't actually get to read the book before they write this. So they're just given like a plot summary and they're like, write the back of the book, make it exciting sounding. But literally, so they say a young heiress is kidnapped who happens to own a priceless carousel horse. That's like the main plot point that they reference on the back of this book.
Hmm.
That's not what happens. Like, I'm sorry. So, young heiress, they must be referring to Joy. I feel
Yes.
like she never gets kidnapped.
No.
Rose gets kidnapped, but she's not the young heiress. And also, they don't know at the time that she owns a priceless carousel horse. They just think
No,
she
they don't.
owns a carousel horse. So, this is just wrong.
Your summary is different than mine.
Stop.
Mhm.
What does your say?
A newspaper reporter challenges Nancy to solve a weird mystery involving an amusement park merry-go-round.
True.
All true so far. Why does the carousel light up in the middle of the night and begin revolving and playing music when no one's around? In search of an answer, Nancy finds herself matching wits with two clever criminals and tries to hunt them down in the park's amusement house. Meanwhile, a teenage heiress seeks the young detective's help, deciphering a strange flower riddle that her father presented to her just before he died. True, but the plot thickens when the woman who holds the vital clue to the mystery suddenly disappears, implying that that's Joy. I know now that it's Rose, but it just makes it sound like Joy is going to be kidnapped.
Well, and also the lady doesn't hold any clue to solving. She doesn't hold a vital clue.
No, she doesn't. And then with the help of her friend Ned, but really it's mostly Bess, honestly, Nancy sets out to catch the sinister culprits, but discovers they're too late when she and Ned are caught in a trap. What trap
What?
did they get caught in? This made me think that it was going to be a similar ending with literally trapping him in the trapdoor or whatever.
Right.
I was like, oh, we're going to fall in the hole that Elliot falls in. We don't. Nothing like
That's
that at all.
so interesting that I think the cover or the back cover of your book is more accurate.
Much more accurate, except those two sentences that are completely out of nowhere. It's like, what does that mean?
It's super weird that both of them have like pretty straightforward errors in them.
Mhm.
That's crazy.
Mhm. Or just plot points that shouldn't be revealed on the back of the book.
It's true.
Like
True. It's true. But it just seems like surely those get reviewed before the books go to print.
I would hope. It can't be like the art where they do it ahead of time before the book's even finished. Like,
Well, even if they do even if they do it ahead of time, even if they write it ahead of time, they surely get reviewed before the book gets sent to print. Surely there is a total mock-up of everything on the book, the cover, the inside, the back cover, that someone reviews before it goes to print, and you wouldn't check this to make sure there wasn't any inconsistencies on it first and edit it?
I can almost understand mine, but yours was written well after the book had already been published.
Right. Because
But-
it's a minstrel edition versus your
Yeah.
Wanderer edition. Minstrel editions were after Wanderer editions. So
Is there
Yeah.
a year on yours? It had to have been out for years already if they'd already changed the cover art.
it says first minstrel books printing, April 1988. But if that was when the book came out, that can't be. Hold on. It didn't come out in 1988.
Oh, 83.
Correction, 83. Okay.
Okay, so Harriet had only been dead like a year at this point, actually. But
Okay, plot thickens. Plot thickens. Here we are solving her own mystery.
I didn't catch that because, I didn't even check the year on my book.
Yeah.
'83. Sorry, y'all.
Okay. Well, so 5 years later. So you would think they could have corrected the issues on the back. But
Mhm.
then so if it was only a year after Harriet passed away, then maybe
Mhm.
this was a plot that was originally owned by Stratemeyer Syndicate. And maybe that's why it feels so old-fashioned.
Possibly. It does say I do have something that says James Duncan Lawrence also did the outline for this one, but who
Okay.
knows? Harriet probably sat down and threw out 1,000 ideas, and they just had
Well,
a list that they went out.
yeah, it could have been an existing plot that was
Right.
like reworked
Mhm.
by him. So
Interesting.
interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Is there anything else weird on your description?
No, it's really just that. I mean, that's really the only thing that refers to the plot at all. It's just the Wonderland Gallop, a merry-go-round at the Riverside Amusement Park, seems to have a mind of its own. Late at night, when the park is deserted, the Wonderland Gallop takes off on a bizarre riderless journey to nowhere. When Nancy Drew sets out to investigate, she is drawn into a tightening circle of fear and crime. Okay. And then the young heiress is kidnapped. Carousel horrors, blah, blah, blah. It's up to Nancy to take the reins and solve the double mystery of the missing woman and the midnight rides of the haunted carousel. But it's like, but she's not really solving the mystery of the missing woman. I mean, she does
No.
track down a missing woman, but that is really doesn't have anything to do with the
Mm-mm.
rest of it. She's just doing that kind of out of the goodness of her heart.
Right.
I mean, nobody wants, anyone would want to help a kidnapped woman,
Sure,
but
yeah,
like,
nobody wants her to stay kidnapped, like
right. But it's not really, it doesn't make it seem like it's part of the central story. So,
It didn't need to happen for Nancy to have solved this.
right.
Like, it's irrelevant.
Yes. Yeah. So, interesting. Okay. I don't know that I have anything super significant to say about it, except I think it's hilarious the way they talk about Ned and Nancy's relationship in this book.
Yes.
First of all, because of the whole, like, I don't know, feels very traditional the way they like are relating to each other, and Ned's like making sure to like get Carson's permission before he takes Nancy out somewhere or whatever.
Mhm.
But whatever. But also they do not refer to them as being boyfriend and girlfriend. They refer to them as being friends, and I thought that was funny they mentioned that on the back of your book. But like in the text, let's see.
I thought they did call him boyfriend at some point. Maybe I'm
Maybe
making
they
that up.
do, but they definitely refer to them as friends at one point because so let's see. So they're staking out the daycare at the end, right? And any developments, Ned? Nothing so far. I just wish we'd brought something comfortable to sit on. Nancy giggled softly. Never mind. At least there's enough grass and undergrowth to keep the pine needles from pricking us. She leaned against her friend's shoulder, and Ned slipped his arm around her waist. 20 minutes went by pleasantly as they chatted under their breath and enjoyed each other's company.
Aw, I guess.
I just feel like that's scandalous, first of all.
Mhm.
Like, second of all, that's not your friend. You don't cuddle with your friends under a bush. Like, come on. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Come
no,
on.
they introduce him as her boyfriend. When he shows up at the boat in chapter 3, he was Nancy's boyfriend, Ned Nickerson.
Okay, well, but then why later? Why later do they like her friend, Ned?
I feel
She
like they
leaned
do that
against
a
her
lot.
friend's shoulder. Why didn't they say boyfriend's shoulder?
Like, they kind of alternate the words, like they're trying not to use the same word over and over again, which I understand
don't-
doing for adjectives, but not for...
But they don't call him her boyfriend anywhere on this page or in the chapter even, I think.
That's so strange. Yeah, it doesn't...
Yeah.
It's far enough away that they could reuse the word boyfriend without it being weird, you know?
Yeah. Or date or, anything like that. But it's like, it seems very pointed, like they're trying to say they're friends while they're cuddling under a bush. It's just really weird. I will say he does so right after like her plan has worked or whatever. Ned compliments her and says, "Nice going, beautiful." And I did swoon a little bit when he said that. I thought that was really cute.
Very
nice.
nice.
Ned Gurley is on my minstrel edition. That's at the beginning of chapter 18, page 151. If you want to read that, and love that. But yeah, no, overall, hated Ned in this book. He was horrible. Mostly, it just really started off on the wrong foot, I think, with the scaring them on the riverboat. That was totally out of pocket. And so even though he is slightly helpful later, I'm like, you're trash. You've always been trash. You like to scare girls for fun. You awful, awful person.
Gosh.
But anyway.
I feel like we could have done without Ned as well. We could have
Yeah.
easily just had Bess and George with us in this one.
Mhm.
He wasn't, I mean, it's nice for Nancy to have someone there with her, but
Sure.
he wasn't necessarily super helpful, except I guess
No.
in the fighting scene where
Yeah.
Nancy did most of the fighting.
Well, no, because he literally got pushed onto the ground, or he fell. He fell, and the guy came over and just started, like, kicking him in the stomach, which is, like, super intense.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he wasn't much help
No.
there. He actually ruined it because, like, if he hadn't have been there, Nancy maybe wouldn't have been caught in the first place.
Yeah, because they only noticed him because of Ned falling.
Because he fell.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Oh,
Frank Hardy would never.
Frank Hardy would never.
Would
Oh my
never.
gosh. Oh. I think my only other issue is just the title. Because this is not a spooky book, obviously, by any means. We're not trying to make it like a haunted atmosphere.
Mhm.
I have the same issue with the game as well. It's more just like the malfunctioning carousel than it is a haunted carousel. Like everyone
Yeah.
in River Heights just jumps to it. Oh, it's moving because it's haunted. No, wires just mess up sometimes. And maybe it just like had a malfunction and needs to be serviced.
Well,
You know?
yeah, and it's also, like, it's not spooky at all. Like,
No.
they don't even really try to make the atmosphere that spooky. The only truly spooky part is that Nancy goes through the, haunted house,
Right, yeah.
but that's, like, literally a chapter. Like, it's barely even a chapter. It might be, like, half a chapter.
Yeah.
So it's not I don't know. It's just not a big enough plot
Yeah.
point, and it also has nothing to do with the carousel.
Right. So haunted amusement park really isn't even the right name.
Or it should be like the Mystery of the Wonderland Gallop, or like
That would be cute. Or just Mystery of the Carousel Horse.
Yeah,
You know,
or
something simple.
Yeah. But what is there's no haunting. There's no mention of a specific ghost. There's never a creepy ghostly figure. There's nothing like that. Not even really any spooky ambiance, except in a haunted house, which, by the way, is supposed to be spooky, is designed to be spooky.
Right.
So. I did remember another plot hole, though.
Oh, yeah?
So when they get cast adrift at the marina, from the marina?
Oh, yes.
Who cut the rope?
Right.
Was it Fingers and Baldy or Novak? Those are our three criminals, but like,
It had to have been, but
why?
did they follow them home one day and just waited until they fell asleep to do
But
that?
like, what? I'm sorry, what purpose does that serve? Like, do we think that did they believe that by cutting the rope on the boat that they would be killing Nancy? Is that what we're supposed to understand? Because it seems like a really slim chance, even if
Right.
the lights are out on your boat, that like you're going to be gliding down a river and get into such a severe boat crash that you die.
Right. Maybe they just wanted her to go away. They're like, she'll get lost and just not come back, right?
Okay, theory. Maybe it was the Custer children because they
Oh my
hate
gosh.
Bess and George so much that they're like, get these people out of here so they don't have to babysit us again.
Oh my gosh. That's funny.
They're like, the first time that we were with them, they made us chase down pickpockets in the amusement park and wouldn't let us go on all the rides we wanted, then made us go home early to eat the gross dinner that they made us.
Yes. That's my headcanon now. It was the Custer children. They did it. That's so funny. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But no, I don't have anything else. I don't think so.
Me neither.
I still think the most interesting part about this whole book is the fact that Joy is under guardianship until she's 21, and that is still an
Right.
unsolved mystery. Oh, wow.
Flashlight score?
3?
That's what I'm going to give it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it makes sense. I don't love how they set it up. It's not super memorable, but I guess it's a good mystery, you know? So, yeah. Interesting. I was interested.
Mhm.
So, yeah, 3. Middle of the road.
Yes.
Totally middle of the road. Oh my God, Kori. Next up, are you excited?
I'm so
I am
excited.
so pumped.
This is probably our most requested episode. Like,
Oh,
people have
yes.
been messaging us for years saying, please cover this book.
Yeah. And you may have guessed what it is, but it is number 77, The Bluebeard Room.
Yay!
You guys get excited, get pumped. We read the back of this book. I read the back of this book the moment it came in the mail.
Yay.
And I was like, oh my God. I don't know. I believed everyone when they said how crazy it was.
Mhm.
But reading the back of this book made me get way hyped to read this.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys ready?
Yes.
A desperate cry for help leads Nancy to British shores. Her friend Lisa Harwood married the Lord of Penvillin Castle, high above the fog-enshrouded cliffs of Cornwall. But Lisa's good fortune has turned suddenly sinister. Some strange and hypnotic power has cast a spell over her, drawing her into a tangled web of menace and madness. Nancy, meanwhile, has fallen under the spell of Lance Warwick, lead singer of the Crowned Heads. She soon discovers that he too has played a role in the eerie events in Cornwall. Lisa's fate now rests in Nancy's hands. Nancy must descend into the dark shadows of Penvillin and uncover the haunting, harrowing truth behind the mystery in the mists. In The Bluebeard Room.
So good. I'm so excited to read this one. I haven't started it yet. I don't think we said this is, of course, the inspiration for the game, Curse of Blackmore Manor. Well, one of the inspirations. The
Right.
other one we've already covered, which was Mystery at Morsea Manor, I want to
Yes,
say.
correct.
Which sounds like it has less in common with the game than this book probably will.
Because obviously Penvillin is a direct take from this book.
Yeah.
And also takes place at a manor house in Cornwall. There's literally Nancy's friend married this guy. She's going through some kind of weird spell situation. That's also direct take. Probably Curse of Blackmore Manor directly took that from this book. So, oh my gosh. So excited.
So wonderful.
Um,
Also, I don't know. I'd have to double check on this. I don't know if you know this, but 77 and 78, which was the book The Phantom of Venice, were both planned to be backdoor pilots for the Files because they started.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Also, side note, because of the year thing, the Files had not started yet. They were until like 4 years after this book would have been. But yeah, the Files started directly after the book The Phantom of Venice. So I think that this book and that one were written to be a little bit more, thrilling, exciting, like the Files are.
To get readers interested.
Exactly. So I think that that's probably the explanation for why it's supposedly one of the craziest books in the entire franchise. But also I'm just really excited to read it because of that kind of Files influence. Kind of fun.
Oh God,
Yeah.
yes. Well, and I mean, I was going to mention Nancy fallen under the spell of Lance Warwick. So it doesn't seem like this is a Ned book. This seems like Nancy is interested in another guy in this
That's
book.
very Files. That's interesting. Ooh, okay.
Also, I gotta say, I don't know what cover you have, Kori, but I love this cover. Nancy is wearing a red tank top, so you know it is gonna be spicy. She's showing her arms and she's wearing red. Also, the guy on the cover, who I guess I'm assuming is this Lance Warwick character, is wearing a cutoff jean jacket, like the sleeves are cut off on this jean jacket, which peak 80s.
Huh. No, I actually have a different cover. Nancy is scuba diving with some random man whose face we can't see.
Oh, that's a scary cover.
Yeah.
Ooh, I love that cover. I mean, Nancy's face looks kind of weird in it, in that, like, it doesn't look like Nancy necessarily, but
the angle's weird as well. It's like coming at her from under her chin almost.
Well, it's a little bit, this is going to sound weird to say, so forgive me, regular Drews. It's a little bit of a pin-uppy, porny kind of a face.
A little bit, yeah.
Like it's a little bit too lips parted, baby doll, rosy skin situation. Anyway, but yeah, I'm super pumped.
Ooh, the little copyright page summary. You know how the copyright page has like the briefest of summaries? The young sleuth travels to Cornwall, England to uncover a mysterious coven of witches plaguing an old friend.
Oh, I didn't know they were going to be witches.
Yes.
Oh,
I'm so excited.
Oh, I'm so excited. Okay. Well, join us next time, regular Drews, for the Bluebeard Room.
Yep. See you then.
Thank you for listening to Regular Nancy Drew. Email us at regularnancydrew@gmail.com.
If you like this episode, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe.
You can also follow us on Instagram at Regular Nancy Drew and Twitter at RegularND.
You can also support us on Patreon. Patrons at the $3 level vote on upcoming episode topics and get exclusive access to our Scoop Sesh series.
And all patrons receive early access to each episode as well as weekly bonus content.
And to all you regular Drews out there,
Thanks for listening.